fit right here. I'd hold you up and say to your mother, this kid's gonna be the best kid in the world. This kid's gonna be somebody better than anybody ever knew. And you grew up good and wonderful. It was great just watching you every day. It was like a privilege. Then the time come for you to be your own man and take on the world, and you did. But somewhere along the line, you changed. You stopped being you. You let people stick a finger in your face and tell you you're no good. And when things got hard, you started looking for something to blame, like a big shadow. Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
If that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will. Sylvester Stallone screaming at the camera, telling you to move forward, that is as inspirational as movies get. And the Rocky movie series has the inspiration level of locking 10 motivational speakers in one room for 16 hours. Let's start with the first Rocky movie to see how inspirational this movie series is. The first one is definitely the most inspirational out of the bunch, and it's also the most emotional. And I think that this movie focuses a lot more on drama than action. While the sequels feel like boxing movies, this one feels like a drama about a boxer. There's not really any action in this movie other than the last scene, the final boxing fight. Most of the time this movie is a very quiet, somber drama or a romance movie about the character of Rocky Balboa, played by Sylvester Stallone. And Sylvester Stallone is this character. There are some actors that are synonymous with characters, like how Christopher Reeves is Superman. His name is Sylvester Stallone, but we all remember him as Rocky Balboa. The supporting characters in this movie are all also very strong and very well acted by actors like Talia Shire or Burt Young. The thing about the supporting characters in this movie is that they don't feel like they are just there to assist the story. They feel like they have a life of their own. They all have their own stories, and they all feel very colorful, very lively, and that's why this movie works so well, because this whole movie just feels so alive. I like how the ending fight in this movie doesn't feel like it's a fight about victory. It's a fight about redemption. There's a lot of things riding on this fight. This isn't a fight just for some championship belt. And the fight is great not because of the boxer's skills. The fight is great because all of the mental and psychological things behind it. It's because this fight represents Rocky Balboa's want to find the meaning to his life. He's a guy who's lost. He doesn't know what to do with his life anymore. And this fight is going to make him realize his place in this world. John G. Avildsen is a very good director for movies that are inspirational, like The Karate Kid, which he directed in the 80s. Before he directed that, he gave us Rocky. And I think that John G. Avildsen knows how to make a movie very inspirational, because after you watch Rocky, you're going to feel like you want to do something, and you want to stand up and go out and actually do something with your life. But no, we're just going to come back home and just watch Rocky 2. It's very hard for a sequel to live up to the original movie, especially if the original movie is as good as Rocky. But Rocky 2 does address some differences, not a lot, but some minor differences from the first movie that make it worth watching enough. And it doesn't really have a lot to say about this movie. It's just a rematch between Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa, so I don't really have a lot to say. So it's fine. Rocky 3 is amazing. I think Rocky 3 is really good, but I think many people just overlook this as yet another one of those Rocky sequels. But personally, I think that Rocky 3 is one of the better sequels, because it does address something that's very different from the first movie. At this point at Rocky 3, Rocky has already forgotten why he likes boxing at the first place. He's forgotten the reason why he started. And I think that that's a very relatable factor. A lot of people, when they reach one point in their career, they just forgot why they love this thing at the first place. And that's what this movie is about. It's about searching for that pure kind of love that he had back in the first Rocky movie. Or as Apollo Creed likes to say it, that look in his eyes gone. So this movie is like a mental battle. The only way for Rocky to win this match isn't through a lot of training, isn't through a lot of sit-ups, a lot of push-ups. It's about overcoming this mental obstacle that he has in his head and gaining back the kind of vigor and courage that he had in the first movie and that will to win. And also this movie has Apollo Creed training Rocky, which is the best training montage ever. I don't think that any other Rocky movie has the same awesomeness of this training montage. It's just so cool that Apollo Creed started out as the opponent of Rocky, and now he's becoming a friend of Rocky, and now he's a trainer of Rocky. And it's really cool to see how Rocky has grown from the first movie, and also how his opponent Apollo Creed has grown from the first movie. And Apollo Creed will always be remembered as the best opponent in the Rocky franchise. And in this movie, there's a really cool cameo by Hulk Hogan. He plays a wrestler in this movie. It's a wrestler playing a wrestler, makes sense. And the opponent in this movie is Mr. T. Rocky versus Mr. T. Rocky 4 is definitely the worst Rocky movie out there. There isn't a Rocky movie, that's worse than Rocky 4. Because the villain in this movie, the opponent, is just so comical. It almost feels like Rocky is facing off against a half human, half machine cyborg. Because that's what Ivan Drago feels like. He only speaks for like 5 times in this movie, and he only speaks 5 words at a time. He's so comical, he doesn't feel real at all, and this movie goes against everything that the first Rocky movie was about. This movie is filled with a lot of action sequences, and it's filled with so many pop songs that you would think this is a music video. And all of the supporting characters like Adrian or Paulie, they are all reduced to background cardboards because they don't really do anything in this movie. This movie is just cheesy as hell, and there's almost no story to this movie, and it's the worst Rocky movie ever. Not to mention the fact that Rocky ended the Cold War in this movie. That's the most stupid sentence that I have ever said. Rocky 5 isn't as bad as people say it is. I think it's definitely better than a lot of people claim it to be. I think that Rocky 5 does introduce some new things to the series, and it does attempt to bring this series into a new direction by introducing Tommy Gunn and focusing on the relationship between Rocky Balboa and his son. But as much as I appreciate the effort of the filmmakers, those efforts weren't very well realized, and I think that it's just filled with too many ideas, and they don't really know what to do with these ideas. So these ideas aren't explored very well. Rocky 6 is the comeback movie for Rocky. In this movie, Rocky makes a comeback, both as a character and for the movie series as a whole. This movie goes back all the way to the beginning, and even the poster of this movie looks like the poster of the first Rocky movie. This movie kind of ignores the very silly tone in the Rocky 4 and Rocky 5, and it focuses on being a very serious and somber character study, much like the first movie. And the movie is all the better for that. This movie continues the focus on the relationship between Rocky Balboa and his son from Rocky 5. And it's really cool to see Rocky has grown so much from the first movie to this movie. Now he is living a quiet and peaceful life, and he has a restaurant of his own. He is retired from boxing, but he wants one last fight. And this movie addresses things that aren't addressed in the last 5 movies. It has a completely different message. This movie goes all the way back to the beginning, and that's why it's so good, because it understands everything that's good about the first Rocky movie and it expands on it. Rocky 7, or Creed as they like to call it, for some reason I call it Rocky 7. I shouldn't call it that, I'm sorry, because this is not a movie about Rocky. It's about Adonis Creed, and Rocky is just a supporting character in this movie. He is just there to go along the ride. But he has a story of his own. He also has a fight in this movie. Now I know what you're thinking. What? Rocky fights again? Haven't he fought enough? He really fought in 6 movies. Every time he says it's like the last time, but there's never the last time for this old guy. He's always going back and he's always fighting again. But in Creed, he's not fighting a boxing fight. It's not a physical battle that he's going through. He's going through a psychological battle, and he's facing the demons inside of him. And I think that's why I like Creed so much. It's because this movie shows that fighting doesn't always have to be physical. There are plenty of people out there, everyone out there is fighting. Maybe it's fighting to get a promotion at work, or fighting to get better grades at school. Everyone is out there fighting right now. And I think that Rocky is a character that's also an encouragement for everybody to fight for what you love, and it doesn't have to be a physical fight. Another thing about Creed that I like is Michael B. Jordan's performance. He has the physique of a boxer. His muscles are beautiful, but I'm not just talking about that, I'm talking about his acting as well. It's incredible in this movie. And Rocky and Creed, Adonis Creed, they have this sort of bond and relationship that reminds me of the relationship between Rocky and Mickey in the first movie, that kind of teacher-student relationship. And I think that relationship is what drives the movie forward. But it's also the very modern direction by Ryan Coogler. This movie feels very modern. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be a very old-fashioned movie. No, everything looks beautiful in this movie, and there's a cool hip-hop soundtrack. Everybody talks very modernized in this movie. And all the new characters in this movie are just as colorful as the supporting characters in the first movie. I really like the character played by Tessa Thompson in this movie. Creed 2 is a sequel that I don't really think justifies its existence. Like, as a movie, it's fine, but it doesn't really have to exist. I don't know why it exists. It brings back Ivan Drago from the 4th movie. Now, why anyone would bring back a character from the worst Rocky movie is beyond me. I really don't understand why they would bring back Ivan Drago. So by bringing back Ivan Drago from Rocky 4, they really transferred a lot of the problems from Rocky 4 to Creed 2. Now Creed 2 has a lot of the bad things that you can find in Rocky 4, but they're a little bit watered down, but they are still there. I think that Ivan Drago is still a one-dimensional character, and he's still like a very comical Soviet Union bad guy. They make an effort to make him more three-dimensional by adding more to his character, but I really think it doesn't really work here. That effort doesn't really work because Ivan Drago at the end of the day still feels like a comical villain that you would find in Street Fighter. Creed 2 really follows the storyline of Rocky 2 very closely, to the point where it becomes very predictable. It almost feels like Creed 2 is like a rip-off of Rocky 2 because of how predictable the storyline is, and it doesn't feel original anymore. But there are some quiet character moments in this movie that I liked, but beyond that I really don't know why Creed 2 has to exist. I think that Creed 1 is the perfect full stop to the Rocky series, so Creed 2, it really doesn't have to be there. That is what I think about the Rocky series. I think the first Rocky is the best, and I think that Creed is just slightly below Rocky. But definitely keep in mind that Rocky 4 is the worst. Like, this is the only Rocky movie that features a robot. Why anyone would put a robot in a Rocky movie